Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. I am Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor, missing Dave Kale, my co-host this week so far. He might be able to join us later, but he was kept away by a family conflict today. But we do have Marie and Nick from our writer's room, which is definitely for the best today, because today is an exciting transition in Silm Film Season 6, which is always exciting because we are transitioning into discussing actual scripts and outlines of our episodes, having sorted out most of the big picture problems and having figured out where we're headed from here. We now are ready to actually go through and make a story and discuss the story that we've made, and it's pretty exciting. Big fan of episode 1 script, so looking forward to talking about that. Before we get started, let's do some quick announcements. Mythmoot, of course, is coming up. That's the biggest thing. Next week, June 23rd through 26th, is Mythmoot. You can still sign up to attend through Moot Hub, that is to attend remotely. It's going to be a fully hybrid experience, as fully as we can make it. We can't promise an identical experience, of course, for those who are not with us, but we do everything that we can to involve the folks who are attending remotely. And if you sign up for Moot Hub and attend remotely, you will also get access to our recorded archives of the entire thing. So that means you can even see sessions that you missed, because you can only be in one place at a time and all that kind of thing. So that is that's the biggest thing coming up right away. We do have a Spanish Conversation Club meeting on the 21st. Pilar Barrera is going to be teaching a conversation club for in Spanish in our clubs program. That's going to be really cool on the 21st. You can find all these things on our events page. Regional moots coming up. We have 5 regional moots already planned and scheduled and with registration open. Buckeye Moot, our first ever moot in Ohio, coming up soon in Cincinnati on the 30th of July. Mountain Moot, going to Denver again, our first ever mountain moot in Denver on the 24th of September. Middle Moot, that's like our 5th or 6th. I think it's our 6th, actually, Middle Moot. Middle Moot is actually the very first ever regional moot we had was Middle Moot. So we're going to be back in Kansas City on October 8th. We got SoCal Moot. This will be our 3rd SoCal Moot down in Carlsbad, California on November 5th. And then for the first time ever, we're going to Australia. We're having Osmoot in January. And one other that is almost confirmed. That should be confirmed, I hope, within the next week. And this actually represents, we've had a little bit of a change, a bit of an adjustment. But it's going to be a really cool change. So we're having New England Moot. We've bumped it up a week. October 22nd was the date that we had before. It's now going to be on the 15th of October. And it's going to be in Derry, New Hampshire instead of Durham, New Hampshire. But here's what that means. We're going to be hosting New England Moot at a video studio. Like, we're gonna be like sitting in chairs on the filming set with like a 50-foot video screen surrounding us on 3 sides. It's going to be amazing. So Studio Lab in Derry, New Hampshire is hosting New England Moot, and they're excited to do some really fun things. So yeah, we're going to people are going to be able to give presentations with like 3D video backgrounds and stuff. It's going to be kind of amazing. So anyway, it should be a lot of fun. So there's excitement going on with New England Moot. So the shift of date definitely worthwhile. So there we are, October 15th. So that's what is what is coming up. Absolutely, yeah, Nick, that's exactly right. Coming from the future set of Silm Film, and needless to say, I've been thinking about that a lot. Standing there in an actual video studio and thinking about our imaginary and theoretical production. But anyway, let us get back to the imaginary and theoretical production. So, Season 6, Episode 1. So, Marie, any, general notes that you want to make about the, sort of notes that you have, or, questions that you had, or anything like that, for, on Episode 1 script before we kind of get going into some of the details?
I would say the biggest challenge with this one is that there's not one clear storyline that we're telling,
Mm-hmm.
nor is it going to be obvious to the audience that this is the Baron and Luthien season,
Right.
because they're not centrally involved in anything in this at this point. So it feels like we're building up for a different story than we're
Right.
actually building up for with the season. So the challenge was to do that without making it a bait and switch, but also
Right.
try to tell a cohesive story, but also actually do make it the introduction to the Baron and Luthien season. So it's trying to do a lot of things at once,
Yeah. Yeah.
possibly not successfully on all counts.
I liked it. Here's what I liked
yeah, but
about
you
it.
know what's
I do.
going on.
I know it's coming. I know it's coming. Yeah, exactly. There were several places where, knowing what's coming, I was able to, I was able to kind of appreciate the things that were being set up, right? Like, of course, the lines about, Baron and Baron's future, right? And also even the reference to Baron's mom. That was a nice little plant there. I like that. Actually, really, the whole business about their relationship with the Haladin, right? That's something that actually is kind of easy to miss, really. Even from the main text, I mean, that there is a sense in which the alternative for the outlaws, their alternative to staying in Doriath, is going down, to Brethil. That I think you can kind of work out. The narrative doesn't state that. Like we don't get that explicitly referred to in the we don't know that like their hearts are yearning to go to Brethil and rejoin their families. Like that's not alluded to as an explicit element of the story in the text. But I really liked that. I mean that seemed really important. And of course I did like how you were setting up Morwen and Rion as well, though not by name explicitly, which I think, by the way, just as well, because we don't need people thinking they need to remember their names yet, right? Like it's a little early for that. But I think that was still pretty fun. Anyway, I really like the setup of that. But here now I'm digressing and getting into details. So that was one place, of course, in which I could see things coming later on. The scene with Dairon I thought was really well done in setting up Luthien and Luthien's future as well. So there were a bunch of places where you could kind of see things coming. Obviously, Celegorm and Curufin, we're setting things up in some interesting ways. But here's the thing. Here's my general response to what you were just saying, Marie, is that I definitely did not get the impression. So on the one hand, I see what you mean, that anyone who knew nothing at all would not really be able to guess where this season was going after this first episode. I mean, that certainly seems true. However, I agree. I think you succeeded in not making it a bait and switch. Like, it did not seem to me to set up. Like, there were a bunch of potential plot lines, right? So, like, if we play the game, what would somebody who knew nothing about Tolkien at all guess season 6 was about after episode 1, right? Candidates would be, I guess reestablishing the siege, right? So you've got like Maedhros, like what do the Maedhros scene and the Fingon and Finrod scenes have in common, right? Is some kind of rebuilding. Maybe they might think, well, perhaps we're kind of folding the Nogrod stuff into there as well, right? Building dwarf allies and whatever. Okay, so maybe that's, and then of course everyone's thinking about Doriath and Thingol, his pros and cons as an ally, right? And all that kind of thing. There's another thing that comes up in more than one scene. So, there's a general sense that recovering from the destruction of the battle, recovering explicitly in the Maedhros scene, right? But even implicitly in other places, like the conversation between Fingon and Finrod at the very beginning, right, was one place where we can see that. So I would think like that would have to be the major guess, right? That it's going to be about like maybe some kind of counterstrike against the, this is going to be like the Noldor Strike Back season, essentially, right? After the Dagor Bragollach disaster at the end of season 5. And the thing is, if people did think that, they're not wrong, right? That is exactly what this season about. It's just that the Counter-Strike is not going to look like they would guess at the beginning. So that seems to me a perfectly legitimate kind of bait and switch to do, right? The thing that actually I think you did really well to avoid, because it seems to me that those two of the like challenges or dangers that you were talking about seem to me potentially to I don't sort of lay traps for each other. That is the problem of not having a central character and the problem of trying to avoid a bait and switch, right? If you had, I think you steered very carefully between those two things. Had you succumbed to the temptation to try to avoid there's no central character problem, right, and given us a clear through line character, that would have been more of a bait and switch, right? Because then we would have been prepared, like, okay, this is going to be the season about Fingon or whatever, right? Or Gilgalad or whoever, whatever it was. And it's not going to be. I mean, the two protagonists of this season not only were in only a couple of scenes, Luthien in 1, Baron in like 3, maybe, right? 2 in which he had speaking roles, I think, right? Very relatively minor speaking roles. So not only were they in a very small number of scenes, they were minor characters in those scenes, as it was. So there's no way anyone would guess, again, not knowing, who the protagonists of the season were going to turn out to be. But at the same time, I don't think anyone is going to be emerging from episode 1 saying, oh, I can't wait for this big, Fingon season that is coming, right? Because he would be one of my candidates in one sense, right? The whole, like, the new High King, and we're going to reestablish the siege. And, so surely, the story of like Fingon trying to establish an alliance with Thingol, and then Maedhros reestablishing things and them trying to connect with each other, that's going to be the main story, right? So maybe it's going to be Fingon or possibly Maedhros, right? Dark horse candidate, it's going to be Thingol, right? But anyway, it's going to like that's surely that would have been my guess as for where this season was headed after episode 1 if I didn't know anything. But there was not enough evidence given to support it. Like, Maedhros is in one scene. Fingon is in one scene, right? Thingol doesn't appear. Well, briefly. He appears in one scene too, right? Though he's not the central focus of that scene. So anyway, I think it did a good, whereas if you tried to avoid the problem of having no central character or central storyline of the, single storyline of this episode, I think it would have created more problems than it solved. So I thought that was actually handled really well. First, before we proceed, let's make sure that people know where to find this script if they want to read it. Let's make sure that we do that. So you have to go to the forum. So if we go, let's see, I think it's on.
Should be able to get a.
Yeah, there it is. Forums.signumuniversity.org. This is the actual copy of the script that I have here. Forums.signumuniversity.org. The link is here, but if people want to navigate to it, they go to forums.signumuniversity.org, go to Silmfilm, and then season 6, right? And then there's a scripts folder. Oh, so scripts.
It's Silmfilm, scripts, season 6, and then there's a thread for episode 1 that has "We're Back" in the title if you're looking for it.
Okay.
And one of the last posts on that should be a PDF of what you're looking at.
Okay, so that's in that thread. You'll see the sort of discussion of the script, and then the posting of the actual script itself. Okay,
correct.
Cool,
correct.
Awesome. So if people want to find this,
Also, it's important, in case anybody didn't pick up from context clues, that Marie wrote the script.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
With some help, right?
just to make things very clear. So if it's terrible, it's her fault, and if it's awesome, then it's the fault of the team working together.
Exactly. There were a lot of people contributed to the script discussion to plan the episode, and then in the editing process to improve the script before you get to see it.
Yeah. By the way, in my favorite line in the whole script was, "The dragon will keep." I was like, oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, he will, and that's the problem. But we can avoid that problem. Anyway, I definitely kind of LOL'd when I got to that line. That was good.
Yeah.
But it was not exactly designed to be a fully comedic moment, but I thought it was, especially like with the kind of sardonic edge that Maedhros has through that whole scene. I kind of liked it in that way.
Yeah, because he's really kind of aggravated with them.
Yes,
he doesn't come right out and say it, but he's very clearly not a happy camper.
Maedhros was really restrained, really restrained in that scene. I kept expecting him to lose it, but he never did.
Well, that seemed to be like kind of the direction the character's been going for us. Like he lets it all out in battle, but when he's not actively engaged in slaying, he's very he's got a very tight lid on himself.
For now.
Speaking of Maedhros, I think that one of the things that the script does pretty effectively is the first couple of episodes of the season really are a handoff from the kind of broader narrative of the stories that we've been telling to this much smaller world. And I think that the handoff specifically to Baron that kind of takes place over this episode and the next one is done very effectively in the script. So
it is interesting. Even the way in which the sort of larger big picture stuff we get in episode 1 about the military and political situation in Beleriand, the way that it keeps kind of coming back to Dorthonion, right? When Dorthonion is, and that's a problem, but really, you can see how that the kind of black hole in the middle of Beleriand there, right? That is Dorthonion at this point is kind of ready for the spotlight there, right? And I thought that was cool. So okay, let's then dive in and talk about the episode in order here. So we start off. Kind of loved the opening. I think of the things that surprised me, and I am never quite sure whether I'm being surprised because you guys have added something that we didn't talk about, or whether I'm being surprised because I've so completely forgotten what we did talk about that it's like bursting upon me like a new thing. But I was surprised by Namu's presence. That was a new thing, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, that's not new.
It's not new?
That was totally... For one thing, it was, I think, explicitly your idea.
Probably was. Yeah. Yeah. Was it my idea? Okay. See, there we go.
There is something very particular about this scene that I want to pick out, and it's a detail. I called it out in our comments that you can't see in that document there. There's a bit after the first paragraph. There's a bit where it says the camera narrows to a single point surrounded by darkness and then fades. Then it fades out and cuts to the camera's eye, blinks back open, and blah 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 blah. Now, typically in a regular script, you would not see details like that. That is not a feature that you would see on a script that hadn't had the DP as Dr. Parks would say, the director of photography, go over it, right? Because that's their job, right? But in film, we're not doing shooting scripts. We don't have a DP, and so we will occasionally, very occasionally, and very sparingly, in situations where it's a part of the story, do camera direction. It's not the way that you typically handle that in a script prior to the DP looking at it, but it is a feature of film scripts specifically. Just wanted to call that out.
On account of having no photography to direct. So yes. No, and clearly it was important here because the question was, how do we handle this shift to how do we provide the cues to the viewer that they're seeing the spirit world, right? That they're seeing, they're seeing the same scene from the other side, right? And I really liked the death of the human scout as the transition. The fact that it was a human was particularly interesting, I thought. Not to mention the fact that it seems also to kind of fit a little bit better into the, that is, it kind of points towards Baron and Barahir's continued presence as well, right? Which was nice, but the mixture of human and elf corpses and everything. Anyway, I really like that this actually ending with a person dying, not just looking at a bunch of corpses on the battlefield, not only looking at a bunch of corpses on the battlefield. Okay, awesome. Well, no wonder I liked Namo so much, because it was my idea. So there we go. Like it's the tension. So Vanwa, that's Deadway, right? Yeah.
Yes. So
okay.
Obviously we had to have Deadway. But I kind of resisted writing Deadway into a script.
That's totally fine.
The idea, though, was if I had kept it as Deadway, no one would ever be tempted to say that character's name.
Right.
So it would be fine. Like, it would work as a joke name in the background.
Right.
So no one actually ever says Vanwa.
Right.
Because that's also not this guy's real name. It just means
right.
lost. So he's a lost soul.
Right.
So I named him
right.
Lost Soul.
Right. Like a stage direction as we see in other places, right? But it's, no, that's cool. So the way that the scene panned out, that is, I shouldn't say use terms like panned out is probably a bad metaphor to use in a situation like this, isn't it? The way that the situation that the scene unfolds, right? The exposition seems warranted by the fact that there are so many who are dead here, right? That is, one question, if I sort of back up from it, right? One question is, would, Mandos have to show up personally, right? Like every time an elf dies, right? But is this do they have to go through this script all the time of explaining, okay, and now you have this choice, and are you going to come or not? But you really probably should, and, but we're not going to compel you. And you'd think if this were part of Mandos's regular job description, he'd get awful sick of this job eventually, right? But it seems totally warranted by the occasion, right? By the sort of the grandeur of the battlefield situation. And surely this is the one of the things that it really kind of brings home, right? Is that this is a significant moment in the history of elvish mortality. Have so many elves ever died at one time ever before? I don't think so, right? There have been elvish deaths. There have been other battles and things. And, we had a bunch of elves dying, at the Dagor Aglareb, but nothing like this, right? So just and it's, I thought what I liked about that is it kind of contextualized the start of season 6 very clearly, not just in now let's consider the political and sort of strategic aftermath of the Dagor Bragalach, right? But it really grounded the whole thing in the personal disaster. Let us reflect on how many people died, elves and men alike, how many people died. This is the greatest mortality in the history of Arda, basically. I mean, that's right. I think that's fair to say. This is the third major war involving elves battle involving elves and men.
Yeah. Up until this point, I would say this is the highest amount of incarnate casualties up until this point. The Near Ninth is yet to come.
Exactly.
Right. So the Near Ninth is the fifth battle.
One? Which one am I missing?
The Denethor.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah.
Green elves.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of casualties there as well.
Yeah.
But it was a smaller group.
Right.
But they were almost entirely wiped out. So that was a big deal. But
Yep. Yeah, no, that's true.
Still,
That's true. Yeah, no,
that was a while ago. I mean, that was like 500 years. Yeah, it was season 3.
Yeah.
So it's been 500 years. Mandus only has to come over and do this every so often.
Exactly. When it comes over on special occasions. Yeah, when there's a whole group rate situation going on there. Yeah.
You get a special tour guide if you have a group over
yes.
10,000.
Yes,
right?
We've chartered a special bus for the occasion. So yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Loved the cloaks too, by the way. That was the other detail that I really liked. Right, the Maiar of Namo all had cool cloaks. Am I reading that right? Or yeah. Okay.
Which is supposed to evoke
the bat cloak of Thuringwethil, right? So show that her cloak is a corruption, sort of a twisting of their cloaks, like that. So anyway, so I thought that was really cool. Liked the distinction between human souls and the elvish souls, right? Seeing the humans get drawn away inexorably, right? And the whereas the elves, just kind of watching them go and when wondering, right, and then voluntarily making the choice. I found the conversation between Namo and Vanwa really, it seemed to me to work. It seemed to me very Noldor, right, that they would distrust Namo, right? Namo's obviously got it out for them, right? I mean, these guys are seeing him for the first time since he was proclaiming his curse, right? And loved the stuff about his mercy, right? And the mercy of Namo being bitter to receive. That I thought was some really fun stuff there. Then Sauron and Thuringwethil coming in, right? The Sauron's sort of manifestation as Thu, right? Sauron going all like necromancer at the end, I thought was really fun. One thing that was interesting, and this is like I was kind of left thinking about this, and I was like, well, I don't know what else one would do, like what else we could do in the scene. The one thing that kind of struck me in that is that when Thuringwethil and Sauron command the elvish spirits that remain, it seemed really easy for them to do, right? They would just like crook their fingers and they could immediately, they were dragging, dead way around, on a string after that. And I was like, okay, so on the one hand, like, I guess my question was something along the lines of, is doing necromancy then as simple as just saying, hey, you over here, right? But I didn't know what I wanted instead, right? When I was thinking about that, I'm like, what did I expect Sauron to do?
Sauron and Thuringwethil should pull up in a white van with like, and Thuringwethil should lean out the window with some lollipops.
Right, or like throw bags over their heads or something. No, yeah. But there was, I guess
you were wanting a cost. If necromancy
something
is this evil magic, there should be a cost.
A cost would be one. Like, yes, that. But honestly, it was like, is there like, will it be obvious that there's magic of any kind being done here? And then the further question of, and are we going to make it clear that this is evil magic? And that, as you say, there's a cost to it, right? And that it would probably not be. Now, to some extent, Sauron's own transformation might hint at that, but it also kind of comes around almost as if it were a kind of disguise or like sort of spiritual cosplay that Sauron is doing there at the end, right? Like, and now I shall manifest myself in this way, which of course, like, he could do, right? I mean, that's fine, but yeah, just kind of, I mean, it's clear the essential element I thought was conveyed clearly, like that they have the power to enslave them. And the way in which this rendered so thoroughly and so immediately like moot and foolish the choice of the Noldor, right? They're gonna stay. They're not gonna like just give in to Namo. They're gonna go their own way. They're gonna do their own thing. And then immediately they're just like rounded up like like puppies off the battlefield was fine. Like I liked that element of it. Like the way in which what sounded from his conversation with Mandos as if it were going to be this like noble rebellion, right? Just went all Captain Ahab at the end of Moby Dick really quickly, right? And it just so the immediate payoff of like they made the wrong decision. I kind of like that element. So as far as they were concerned, I thought that worked. It certainly conveyed the essential thing, right? That now these lost souls who made a bad choice, A, they made a bad choice, and B, now they are enslaved, right? Now they are captive. Now they're being used, and they're being dominated. That came across, right? Even to the, I thought, very effective setting up of the, the very, very beginning of our release from bondage theme, right? That we get in the very, very final scene with Sauron creating the pot of evil, right at the very end. So anyway, I thought that all of like it definitely like accomplished all of the things that had to be accomplished, right, in that way. But the element that I was missing was necromancy. Again, necromancy has been done here, right? And also, I guess the other reason that I think that this would, the other place where I think that this would help would be the ghost attack. That, like, why are they acting this way? Like, how have they been compelled to do this, right? I felt like there was the kind of the gap that I as a reader or a viewer was asked to sort of cross in my suspension of disbelief, right? From I saw these otherwise well-intentioned souls captured, right? Kidnapped or whatever, ghost napped at the beginning of episode 1. But now by the end of the same episode, they appear to be fully complicit, attacking their compatriots and, leading to Sauron's. And again, I could do it, right? I could do the, leap, but I felt like there was still, a leap there to be made.
Yeah. So of all the storylines in this episode, the one that is most, the viewer will surely figure this out, is Sauron's storyline. And part of it is to preserve the surprise of the attack on Minas Tirith.
Right.
So we can't have him come out flat out and say exactly what he's up to.
Sure.
But I agree with you that if there's a little bit more about how necromancy works, then it'll be less of a leap to get from well-intentioned captive ghost to evil ghost.
Yes, evil, malicious, danger ghost. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, because why is this ghost dangerous? I don't get it. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. But if understanding what the compulsion accomplishes, so there's a little bit of room here between when Thuringwethel does it and when Sauron does it to have a little bit more exposition.
Yes. Yeah.
So we could have a philosophical conversation about necromancy between those two characters.
They're comparing
that's
notes.
What you're needing.
Yeah,
if that's
exactly.
what you're needing. That can go in there, right, Nick? That would be totally fine. Yeah.
Something like that. More exposition is always better, I think. Nick.
So
that's one of Nick's rules, isn't it? One of Nick's rules.
So another thing to consider is that a certain amount of is magic stuff happening, and is like the struggle involved, right? The back and forth struggle involved could be communicated just through like a well executed special effects sequence, you know. So like our fabulous special effects team would come in, and
Top dog.
it would be like something on the order of not exactly this, but the conflict between Sauron and Gandalf in the second Hobbit film, the one where with the glowy bubble and the black shadow trying to get into it, and
okay, right,
not that effect. Obviously, it's a different effect.
You've blocked
them.
off.
Yes.
A lot of the Hobbit films. So, but yes, I'm remembering that now.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I guess at its simplest level, what I want is to see, because there are two things ultimately that Sauron needs to accomplish, right? Arguably three. One, merely to capture and bind the spirits, right? So I'm just going to capture, to imprison you, right? That's step one. And that I thought was clear. Like that was the thing that was most clearly accomplished. The second step, though, is I'm going to compel you to do my will, right? So that you are now going to be an agent of like fear and evil, and you have no choice. I am enslaving you to my will. You are now an agent of my will, right? Which then I would be prepared. I don't need to know how his will is going to apply them, right? But if I know that his will is going to apply them, I mean, honestly, when we got the two guards and we got the first ghost sighting, right, at Tol Sirion, I was not yet sure what we were seeing. Like, I wasn't sure what how much under their own control the ghosts were, right? Anyway, so compulsion, right? You are now my thrall and you are performing my will. And then the possible third one is I am in some sense like feeding on your power, and I am being strengthened by my connection with you. And that one can be vague and certainly could actually wait until post Pot of Evil, right? That could be one of the functions of the Pot of Evil, in a sense, and wouldn't be necessary. Like if that never happened, if that was never conveyed, then I think that would be fine. But that second one seems to me a really important step to be made. So it doesn't even have to be, and of course, obviously I was teasing Nick about the exposition, but it doesn't even have to be more exposition that we would need, just that one extra step, right?
Yeah.
Like to characterize it in like a really, deliberately trivialized way. If Thuringwethil first does the ensnaring, right? And is like, look, you can capture them like this. And then Sauron is like, oh, yeah, hey, what if you do this too? Whammo. And then he whammies it, right?
Yeah.
Even something kind of parallel to the Bottomless Dread, the spell of Bottomless Dread, right? Because he was watching that and taking notes, right? So what if he does a Bottomless Dread-esque thing, right? To that, so that we see on screen Vonway has been dominated, right? And we could see the difference between Vonway being dragged along, possibly like, ephemerally kicking and screaming, right, behind Thuringwethil. So if Thuringwethil's able to basically do the spiritual equivalent of putting like a chain around, his neck and dragging him along, right? But then Sauron lays the whammy on him, and now he's docilely following along behind Sauron. And we could even have like, I don't know, all you'd need was just for him to like send them off to do something and have them go, like, just demonstrate that they are now extensions of his will and they're doing whatever he wants them to do. Then I would be completely ready for when we see the ghost. I would know. You could even do, Nick, thinking of special effects, and this is, I know, like this would be like a very 1980s level special effect, but again, it could be really as simple as like changing the color and appearance of the spirit, right? Like once it gets that, it just doesn't look the same.
It's right? Like in Tron, it once it's under the control of the master control program, it turns red.
Yeah, that a cue like that, so that then when red spirits show up, right, at Tol Sirion, I know what I'm dealing with, right? Okay, This is one that's been, because again, when our eyes have been opened in the beginning of episode 1 to the fact that like in an otherwise apparently deserted by living creatures battlefield, there are spirits floating around. When we see spirits floating around the battlements, it's like, okay, wait, can all elves see that? Like, is this normal? Is this like somebody coming to say goodbye, or what's going on here? Like that, we've been introduced to that. But again, if we know from the beginning, malicious spirit dominated by Sauron has just come on stage, then I think we're a little bit more prepared.
If the process of the not quite bottomless dread now with necromancy, if that process causes them to physically change, like they're more haggard, like there's a whole transformation that takes place within the ghosts themselves, and then the ghosts that we see at Minas Tirith later have very clearly gone through that transformation.
Actually, that's worth thinking about a little bit. What would a post-dominate, like what would a spirit which has been sort of shaped by Sauron's malice look like? What would he go for? And nothing too obviously ring-wraithy, Kuiroi, right? Because that's of course a completely different situation anyway. Wow, I say completely different. Significantly different situation.
He's draining their energy from them, right? Mm-hmm. So something that makes him look a little bit shrunken would probably be good.
Yes.
I mean, they're already dead, so you can't look sickly when you're like walking around with mortal wounds on your body.
I loved that, by the way. I loved the wounds. That was one of my favorite things. Like that as a really cool non-verbal way to signal the link between Fear and Hroa, the Fear and Hroa of the Alapala was really cool. Hang a second. Actually, in order to answer this question, I think we need to go back to the other question, which is the cost to Sauron, right? Because we're talking about him feeding his own power through this, but as we know, there's a cost to him. Just as the Ring of Power, this is the predecessor, right? This is the like alpha edition of the Ring of Power, essentially. What he's going to be doing, what he's doing here. So he's able to dominate them. He has to put forth some of his own spirit in order to do so, right? Mm-hmm. But he gets something back in exchange. Right, he gets something back in exchange, which is he gets power from like with the Ring of Power, right?
Right.
He pours a lot of himself into the Ring of Power, and as a result, his power is indeed increased under certain circumstances and in a way, right? But he is more powerful with the ring than without the ring. He does in fact manage to. He gets something out of making the Ring of Power, right? Or he would never have done it in the first place, right? So too here, he gets something from them, but he's doing something to himself as well. But what's it going to be? It's not the same thing as with the Ring of Power, right? The Ring of Power, like this whole, I'm going to take and distill a large portion of my essence and put it into this physical object. That's like a bridge way further than what he's doing here, right? This needs to be a very, very preliminary kind of thing. So how does it work? If he puts forth a little bit of his power, does he have to put forth some of his power into them? And that enables him to kind of feed on them? It certainly would enable him to use them, to dominate them and to use them, right?
I think that the ability to feed off of them comes later, right? When with the Tub of Evil, yeah. That his power is going into the containment.
Yes, right. His power is going into the containment at that point. Yes,
right.
Yes,
and so he makes his warp core in the basement, right, and he's able to draw from that, essentially.
One tub to enslave them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's definitely what the runes say on the metal.
Absolutely,
the metal
is what the runes say.
Ring around the around the space. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's absolutely a done deal.
What if he drains the light from their eyes? Evan says. Oof.
Well, that would work because these are all Noldor, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would say that actually seems to me almost the minimum of what should happen, right?
Well, he also says ghosts attacking Tolsirian with empty eye sockets would make that way creepier.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I would say we start with that. Actually, I mean, I love that. The fact that they had the light, the light of their eyes, because these are the spirits of the Calaquendi, right? But not only is the light of their eyes drained, but they're, yes, they're like eye sockets are completely empty. Is a really good good visual way to say this person is not driving the bus anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But not physically empty, but like void, like a black hole is in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would be, even to have, I don't mean empty in the sense of like skull,
Right.
empty skull holes, right? But like, completely black, like no iris, no sclera, just like empty blackness,
We're gonna have to get them some contacts painted with that ultra black paint.
Yep. Demons and Supernatural.
I was assuming that these guys were going to be all CGI anyway, so it should be easy enough, I would think. But anyway, yeah, okay. So we kind of start with that, right? That's the signal that their own life and will is no longer driving them, right?
Yes.
What would we want to do to signal? I would think that the power expelled by Sauron would be visible in like linking them to him, right? He could like not physically, but I mean, he could like suck out their eyeballs. Like that would be a way to show him sort of feeding on their power, right? If the light of their eyes, like if he draws the light of their eyes into himself, right?
What's the rating of this show again?
Not like with a straw or something, right? It doesn't have to be graphic. I'm just saying.
Well, you could see the light come from their eyes, like two orbs that come together into one, and then he grabs it physically in his hand, and then the camera cuts back to them.
Right.
And then the camera cuts back to them, and their eyes are
empty. Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly the kind of but we would have to show something going from him to them also, right? Have to show a way in which he's exerted himself in order to enable this, right? In order to enslave them in the first place, right? It's Thorin who shows here's how you, because that was her job, right? She's like rounding up souls. Like that was her day job, right? Back in the day, right? So that's where and we already see her maliciously twisting that, right? She was not, in fact, she wasn't supposed to be throwing a net around them or, a manacle or something like that, spiritually speaking, which is what she's doing, right? So her step there seems to me a very logical step to considering the background that we've given her and everything, as former spirit of Namo, which, by the way, that is so good. Like, I'm loving the background we've given to Thorin Gwethel all over again. So good. But anyway, even the way in which the whole like vampire thing as like vampire as like twisted Maiar of death, like so good. Like, oh my goodness. It's just so good. But anyway, okay. So Sauron's innovation then is beyond containment, right? Beyond capture to this domination. I don't know that we need to, when I say we need to show something coming out from him, I don't know that we need to like visually like show something actually emerging from him. Like we don't have to be quite so literal about that as far as he's concerned. But what we do want to show, Marie, as you said, is the cost. right? Especially since we need to show this cost coming due when the tower collapses and the spirits are all released, and we have to prepare now for how we are going to show him being visibly weakened and damaged when the tub is opened. I'm not sure how to represent that with Sauron. Well, first of all, before we think about how to represent it, what is it? Like, what is the consequence to him? He's weakened. It's going to take him some time. It's going to take him some time to recover himself. Not quite post Numenor recovery time, or even post having the ring cut from my hand by Isildur recovery time. It's not going to be anything like that, because he's not done anything like the Ring of Power yet. But what is going to be the cost to him? It needn't be very great, let me emphasize also. I think that what we need to show, what we would want to show in this long game that we're playing with our secret protagonist, Sauron, right? Our secret main character, Sauron, through the entirety of Silmfilm. This is the very first step on that nihilistic road, right? We've seen him make many steps towards evil and stuff, but one of the things that we've shown is this tension between him and Morgoth, where Morgoth is willing just to wreck stuff, and he's still trying to build, right? He's still trying to make things rather than just destroy things. That's been one of the tensions between Sauron and Morgoth through the first 5 seasons. This, it seems to me, would be the first moment where he sets his first foot on the path that Morgoth is already treading, right? Of destroying himself in the interest of destroying everything else, right? Ultimately, that's where Morgoth gets, right? Into this completely, practically, this self-destructive, nihilistic place where he is destroying himself in order to destroy the world.
So Sauron is going to be in the middle of a fight when the tower falls and the tub of evil is destroyed. But it's possible that we could show him being impervious to attacks prior to the destruction. So he's using his borrowed power to protect himself. But then once the tub is opened up and the souls escape, all of his wounds hit him at once. Type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, yeah. That's a great idea, because of course I'm thinking now of some of the Nature of Middle-earth stuff, right? And in particular, I'm thinking about Tolkien's writings about how they get more tied to their physical form, right? Over time, right? That could be a way that we could manifest it, right? That he's going to get to the point where somebody can stand on his neck and cut his finger off, right? That would presumably not be possible right now. He's not sufficiently tied. There's nothing yet really tying him to the physical, binding him to the physical world. He can take any physical form he wants at any point, right? He's not bound to the physical world. His binding to the physical world is one of the things that's going to change, right? Progressively over time. So that would be a really interesting way to show this, and to show him being vulnerable. I don't know about his wounds kind of all coming home, but he could get wounded after that, right? Yeah, he's because he would not. How would he be vulnerable to attack? He's not even a physical being, right? If you were manifesting your physical body by an act of will, and you're in a physical combat with somebody, presumably you could manage that fairly cleverly, right?
Yeah, but he's not in physical combat. He's in song combat with Luthien. Yeah. So I don't know what song combat does to you.
Right. But all that we would need to do is show some kind of physical thing not affecting him, right? We just need to see one physical thing pass through him, whatever it is, right? Under any circumstance, just to show that he's he's impervious to any kind of physical attack, right? He's not even really truly physically there. But then when the tub breaks, he it could even be something as simple as like rubble from the explosion hits him, and to his surprise, like knocks him over. You know, he can't, you know, like phase out of that or whatever. But yeah, you know, I think that would be interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to see if we could pull that off. But I think that seems to me a really promising direction for this, because again, we can't, as always with Sauron, we have to be super gradual, right? We can't push him too far over the edge too soon. It's still way early in Sauron's career arc, right? But yeah, the notion that this is going to tie him more to the physical world that he's never been before, that I really like. Okay, cool. So maybe we can do that, and then thinking about how that gets manifested. Yeah, I don't know. All we would need to show is something to suggest that the process of enslaving the, you know, enslaving Vanwe, like hurts, like it just, again, I think visually we could non-verbally we could show that, right? Sauron lays the whammy on them and it's like clearly painful to him, right? But then he inhales I kind of like inhaling, right? He inhales the light from their eyes and is stronger than he was, right? Better and stronger than he was, right? Like the kind of subtitle, right, of that thing would be, it was worth it, right? That's a good exchange. Yeah, that hurt a little bit. That's doing something unpleasant and unnatural to me, but net gain, right? Net gain. So I'm cool with that. And then he's gonna, the final step, right, of actually making the tub of evil and doing his, putting the fire letters around the edge of the edge of the tub, is to then, like, sort of the next stage of the same kind of process, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Odalana. Sauron binds himself in order to be able to bind others. Yeah. That's exactly kind of how that bargain works, really. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I like that. I think this will help a lot then. If we've got these eyeless elf spirits attacking later on, I would have had fewer questions about that. It also answers the question that Philip was asking before about elves not really being bothered by spirits of the dead, at least based on Legolas. There are two things that I'd say about that, Philip. Thing number one, spirits of men, right? That doesn't necessarily tell you how they would react to unquiet and rebellious spirits of elves necessarily, which might creep them out in some other kinds of profound ways, right? But then the other thing, Philip, is that, again, if these are not just, spirits wandering about, but clearly damaged and horrible, horribly torture. There's something very wrong there, right? That I think would also help to explain it. So, okay, cool. Awesome. Well, we'll come back and we'll talk more about the ghost fight when we get to the ghost fight sequence. But that was good. That was my only real sort of question or issue in that opening sequence. So Sauron the Necromancer. All right, so we talked about some of this already. Thorin showing how to ensnare them. Right, yes. The Sauron and Gothmog quarrel was kind of genius, actually. I really liked the Sauron-Gothmog quarrel. What I loved about it was the reminder, which it is so easy to forget, of how vulnerable the orcs are to sunlight. Like, that is a factor that is easy to forget like when reading the Silmarillion, easy to forget how much the orcs dislike the sunlight, and the fact that that's still kind of a big deal. That it would, I mean, I found myself saying when I got to that scene, I'm realizing I had never really thought about what a significant logistical issue this would be for Morgoth and his armies to deal with this whole, I mean, you don't want, as you were suggesting in the script, you don't want to go on campaign in the middle of the summer, which is, of course, exactly when you do want to go on campaign normally, right? In a normal human war, right? But when the nights are really short, right? And Sauron's barbs about that were really, I really quite enjoyed. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Sauron's cracks about Gothmog burrowing his way all the way to Doriath, I thought was fun.
Yeah, because Gothmog has trolls in his army.
Right.
So they don't just dislike the sunlight.
Yeah, with trolls, it's a separate issue, yeah.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out how you deal with that. So, of course, underground construction seemed the logical next step.
Right, yes, yeah. No, I really like that. Though I did think it would, I don't think you used the word burrow, but I think that would be even funnier in Sauron's taunt to Gothmog if he accuses him of planning to burrow his way all the way. The characterization of Gothmog as some kind of mole or something like that, would be, groundhog. Yeah, would be really funny. But anyway, yeah, I really like that. The confrontation between Sauron and Gothmog at Tol Sirion was really fun. I didn't sort of see that coming. I could tell that Sauron was kind of racing against him. That he was going to beat him so narrowly was not something I was expecting. But the confrontation between Sauron and Gothmog, I really liked that. I thought that worked really well.
Did you notice that we managed to get the line winged speed in there?
Yeah, I did love the winged speed. Yes. And the fact that the winged speed is turned into a sardonic slap by Sauron was really awesome. That was really funny.
Part of the reason we needed that scene is because the attack on Tol Sirion is not from Sauron's perspective.
Right.
And yet it was part of his storyline. So to finish up his storyline, we needed him to have someone to talk to who wasn't an elf.
Right. So. Yeah, no, right, exactly. He certainly needed an interlocutor, but also I thought that it really helps to characterize, it helps to set up the rule that Sauron is going to institute at Tol Sirion. Right. He is not just going to, obviously we know, and it's suitably emphasized, the military strategic significance of Tol Sirion. Right. Several people talk about that, and that's a big deal. Right. But of course, what Sauron is going to do in Tol and Garahoth is not just make it into a military base from which he's going to, send raids out into the countryside. Right. There's more to it. It's going to be not only more, but also different from that. Right. This is not just part of a military campaign. It just prepares us for a quite different flavor for what is to come, which seems to me very appropriate, very, very right to what Sauron is going to do. And I really like that. And also, of course, it provided a great way to introduce the concept of Sauron being assigned Dorthonian as well, right? We would have just had to have Morgoth, coming out of nowhere to, kind of give that essentially. Yeah. But so anyway, that was also one effect of the Gothmog Sauron conversation is that like meanwhile, Merrill and Gilgalad and everybody are literally paddling away in boats while Sauron and Gothmog are talking to each other, right? So in the end, it kind of makes the capture of Tol Sirion, there's a real undercutting in a sense, I think, but I think not an inappropriate one, right? Undercutting of the entire elf like defense situation, right? As I said, in one way of understanding, of trying to guess what this season is going to be about from the first episode, it would be the attempt to recover the strategic situation and reassert the, somehow just try to recover from the Dagor Bragollach, basically. But everybody emphasizes how important Tol Sirion is, right? Tol Sirion is not only lost, it's like lost twice, right? Like, would they have been able to beat off Gothmog and his army? Probably not, right? 3 balrogs probably would have taken Tol Sirion, I'm thinking, right? So the fact that as the elves are escaping, both of the two invading army, I mean, it almost like doubles, it shows you how doomed Tol Sirion was, and really calls into question, at the very end of the episode, calls into question what seemed to have been building all through the episode, right? That the important thing is, we're going to be reestablishing the elves' position, and the most important element of that is whatever we do, step one is holding on to Tol Sirion, right? Mm-hmm. And then we find not only that they failed to do that, but that there was never a prayer of them doing that, right? The only question was which of the bad guys was going to seize it first, right? That's in fact the only drama as far as Tol Sirion is concerned in this episode, which leaves us, I think, very interestingly and appropriately at the end of the episode saying, well, then what is going to happen this season, right? What hope is there if the only one thing that they said they had to do is already failed at the end of episode 1, right? And that, I think, is as I say, I think it's an appropriate setup for there's an alternative version, right? There is going to be a strike back at Morgoth in this season, but it's not going to look anything like anybody thinks it's going to look. So that failure seemed to me appropriate, I thought, in that sense. Yeah. Oh, and I agree with Evan that Sauron not even explaining, right? He doesn't even do the villain thing, right? Like reveal his whole plot, like brag. Even after the fact, it would have been safe, right? He could totally have like bragged on how clever he was and everything, but he doesn't. He just is standing there like, yeah, took the tower like it ain't no thing, right? No trolls, no, siege equipment needed, whatever. There's that sense, Evan, almost as if he's making it look like he took the tower completely by himself, right? I just basically walked in here, took control of the joint, right? What were you wasting time for? Trolls and siege equipment. How quaint, right? I agree. I thought that was, I loved how high Sauron's stock is at the end of episode 1. Like, he is looking really good at the end of episode 1, and I think that's a really, really great effect. So yeah, big fan. Other thoughts on the Sauron plot before we move on to a different element?
We're gonna get to meet our hero.
Maybe we will get to meet our hero. Sort of. Or at least we'll get to meet the people in whose plot our hero is a minor character.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So we get, Barahir.
Barahir. I was talking about Luthien and Thingol.
Oh, no, not that one.
I'm just
yeah, exactly.
That's more accurate season-wide. In this episode, it's definitely more... we definitely get more Baron, so yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
Barahir's go ahead, Marie.
Sorry, I was going to say that I believe it was Evan who pointed out that we have 3 main characters this season: Baron, Luthien, and Death. So we introduced Death real strong at the beginning of the episode.
Oh yeah,
the other 2 are more subtle.
Yeah, that's true. No one is going to be under any false pretenses that Death is strongly involved, is a central character here. Okay, so with Barahir's band, the thing that you had them get up to was the rescuing of thralls, right? We wanted to see them in action, doing something to be a thorn in the side of the bad guys, and rescuing thralls, certainly. the thing that I thought was most effective about that is it absolutely clarified, easily clarified or answered the question, why are they staying again? Like, what's the, especially, and it's interesting because like you guys also went out of your way in a sense to make the question more difficult, right? By, as I said, like raising the like you made their leaving to go to Brethil seemed not only a really desirable thing for them to do, but a very logical thing for them to do, right? In a sense, it's not only self-sacrifice for them to stay away, right, and to stay in Dorthonion, but it's even like they're sacrificing, like the people in Brethil will also suffer from them not going there as well, right? So, so on the one hand, by really emphasizing that link, which I felt in a really, really appropriate way, in a sense, you raised the stakes on the question of, so wait, why are we staying in Dorthonion again? Leaving seems actually like kind of a good idea. Why are we not doing that? And as I remember we discussed before, the mere, this is our land and we're going to, fight until we die here did not seem like enough to sort of justify it necessarily. Especially since in our story, they're newcomers to this land functionally, right? So this is not even like the land that our fathers have like bled and died for and generations of, no, like some of them still remember arriving, you know, it's like within this generation that they've been living there. So, but anyway, like there are still people, who are being, there are still living humans who are, who are enslaved by the orcs in Dorthonion is a great and obvious reason for them to stay.
But their numbers are dwindling is another point that we wanted to draw out, that Barahir's band is reaching the point of diminishing returns for their mission. And in fact, this is quite possibly the largest group of humans they're ever going to get out again, no matter how long they stay here.
And they know it, right? They suspect it at the very least, right? Yeah. Yes, that, the conversation they have at the end is fairly, like the reasons to leave seem fairly compelling, right? And I actually kind of liked the fact that Barahir's decision to stay didn't feel obvious, right? Like Barahir's decision to stay at the end felt very second guessable, essentially. Right. Though I loved Gorlim's nonverbal contribution to that discussion. Right. Gorlim clearly not ready to, of all of them, the least ready to leave. Right. And I did like that a lot. And of course, clearly the way in which the rescuing of the thralls sets up Gorlim's desperate hope, right, to find Eilunel. That seemed like a really logical setup too. But anyway, so that was good. So wait, so tell me about the dog. This is important, right?
Right. So the last time I wrote a dog into a script, it was observed that the dog was present at the beginning and not at the end, and people were concerned.
This was Holith's dog, right?
Correct. There was, however, like a 12-year gap between those two scenes. So, what do you think happened to the dog?
And also, nobody noticed that her grandmother also mysteriously disappeared.
Very typical. Concerned about the dog, but not the grandma. Yeah.
Right. So knowing that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to put a dog in this script, I better assure everyone up front that we have planned out where this dog is going, and this dog story is catastrophic.
Okay.
So that's all I need to tell you right now. It will come back to this dog later. I think episode 3 will be the time to find out what we're doing with the dog.
Find out about the dog. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also have further plans for this dog beyond episode 3. But we do,
which is why I'm like it'll gradually unfold. But I wanted to assure everyone up front that if your question is, wait a minute, what happens to this dog? I can assure you right now, the dog lives. There's
yes, that's good. Yeah, you guys are like responding like Tolkien did to, first he kills off so many ponies in The Hobbit, and then he takes super special care of all the ponies in The Lord of the Rings, right? Like no ponies are harmed in the making of this story, right? After the hideous losses and pony after pony being eaten by bad guys in The Hobbit. Yes.
And yet Beorn still trusts them.
I know.
With
it was
ponies. Yeah. Like, why on earth?
But that's why he was so careful. That's why he went personally supervised them, right? Because you can't let ponies out of your sight in The Hobbit. But anyway, so it's parallel, right? We got you guys like Tolkien. I mean, I joke that Tolkien, it's some like pony activists who possibly lived in his house got to Tolkien, between the two books, and clearly. Lessons have been learned. Okay, cool. So the dog, I'm looking forward to the continuing adventures of the dog, which, by the way, I mean, can I just say the obvious thing? I really love the Huan anticipation here. Like that there should be a dog who has plays an interesting role. I like that, just to kind of plant the, the seeds for the dog hero who is to come. Seems to work for me. Tell me what you guys are thinking. Why does Barahir make the decision that he makes at the end? What exactly activates Barahir to? I mean, is it just is he in a kind of denial about? I mean, just not wanting to give up? Is it how would you characterize his attitude?
My impression is that he doesn't know what evidence would have to be present to decide, okay, the mission is done.
Okay.
So it's an open-ended mission.
Right.
And once they abandon it, anyone who is still in Dorthonion has been doomed to a horrible fate.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's reluctant to say, okay, we're done, let's go home prematurely.
Right.
Especially when it's pretty clear that Gorlin would probably try to stay behind all of this lonesome.
Right.
Baron is super anti leaving. I don't remember how anti he is at this point in the revisions, but
he suggests that if other people want to go, he'll stay.
Right.
So basically, yeah, Gorlam and Baron are like, we'll stick it out till the end.
Right.
And Barahir's like, okay, we're all still in this together. Let's keep doing this. But he doesn't feel as fully committed as those other two voices because he has doubts that this is still wise. It's been great this far, but at what point is this a bad idea? And he's starting to think about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So he is the one who is most focused on the diminishing returns. Right.
Yes.
Because he's thinking about the big picture more than the rest of them are. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Belagan.
Belagan.
Yeah. Thank you. They're kind of thinking, it might be time, but they're not necessarily as thinking about, well, the mission's kind of over. They're thinking, gee, I'd really like to see my wife and little girl again,
Yes. And I liked that in the sense that on the one hand, they voiced that, right? That's, that got explicitly put out on the table. But it's also clear that, who's going to be the jerk who says, I'd really rather just I know there might be some people left in slavery to set free, but I think I'm just going to go hang out with my family instead. Right. I mean, that's, so it's clearly a difficult situation, but at the same time that, that desire to go to Brethil is real. And even the benefits of going to Brethil are real, in trying to build not only the kind of future that Barahir wanted Beren to have as he talks to him about, but even by extension, the sort of the future that their people could have, right? If they were to return. And one question one way to articulate what I'm talking about is like, what exactly is the primary responsibility of the leader of their people, right? Because the argument can be made that, okay, yes, I understand that you're doing some good works here, right? But one could also say your place is with your people. Like, they need you and your leadership, right? Yeah. And so merely staying until you're all killed is not necessarily doing your duty.
That's the worst part, is that there is no succeeding for this mission.
Right.
You either go home with the knowledge that you may have left some people behind, or you die with the knowledge that there may still be some people stuck there.
Right. Yeah. There's there really isn't any good outcome. And the sort of resignation to kind of make the best of that situation, and move forward. Anyway, yeah. So that was the one. Again, it wasn't a question in the sense that I was wanting to challenge it, but just one of the things that I was kind of thinking through and wondering a little bit more about what was in Barahir's head there. But anyway, the characterization of the mission in that way as really just being explicitly a rescuing people mission, not just a let's stir up some trouble for the bad guys, right? I liked that. I mean, that's a mission that people can get behind, right? That's something that really is compelling, rather than just because if we were to go that other way, right? If it were just like the enemy is in our lands and we're not going to let them have it their own way no matter what, right? If that's the only thing, then it clearly does seem to be a dereliction of duty. No, it would be much better for you to return to your people and lead them into whatever comes next for your people than to stay and do that. But okay. All right. I like that. Let's see. Of the things we got from Baron specifically, we got his interest in staying in Dorthonion, right? So we had his kind of dedication to the cause. We saw that. What else did we see? I'm trying to remember anything else that I was supposed to like my takeaways from Baron.
We established that he's not married.
We established that he's not married, right? And has no clear future. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's still an available bachelor there in Dorthonion.
One thing that I really like is there's kind of like just an edge of bloodthirstiness to him. There's the scene where they're bringing the people out of the barn, right? And the old guy from the village, he says, and the orcs, are they? And he's like, nope, they're all dead, all of them. We got them. It's fine.
Right.
All of them are dead. Like he's very, very clear. Like, nope, we got them. They're all dead. Yep, that's what we did. That's what we do around here.
I made a special point of killing them all, every last one. Yeah. No, that's good. So again, we got very little, really, of Baron's character. Not positively, but negatively. So he's already a vegetarian?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We'll deal with that in episode 2. I merely put the note in there so that if someone was trying to picture like the scene of them sitting around eating, like, Baron should not have a bowl of stew that has chunks of meat in it.
Right. No, I was thinking about that,
but it's not in the script at this point. Yeah.
That was one of the things that I almost forgot that I was uncertain about, though. Why is he a vegetarian now?
Because he already likes animals.
Yeah.
Well, sure. Lots of people like animals, but I mean, like, presumably, like, elves who are not vegetarians also like animals, right? I thought his vegetarianism was a later onset condition.
It is, in the sense that it's during that 4 years when he's by himself and he needs to rely on the
that we're not doing. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So since we're not doing that,
we don't have time for his vegetarianism later on. We're establishing his vegetarianism, and which means we're establishing his friendship with animals as a pre-existing condition of Baron here. Okay.
Now it can still have developed from the same sort of thing.
Sure.
Just that happened during the time in between the end of episode 13 of last season,
right,
and when we see him here.
Right.
Yeah. And we will bring it up in episode 2 so it can be established what his thoughts are there.
Okay. So are we going to get references then to his, because I have to admit, the one challenge or difficulty that I was anticipating from our, it seems to me, inescapable cutting of the 4 years, is establishing his friendship with animals, right? We're going to get that in episode 2. Is that an episode 2 thing?
Well, there's a reason there's a dog there.
There's a reason there's a dog. Okay, I thought the dog might possibly be involved in this.
Episode 3 is where that really comes out.
Okay.
And then we went out of our way to get a scene in episode 4 to show it. So
okay.
Yeah.
Because we are going to need some, I mean, especially since this is not just a character color kind of deal, right? I mean, this is a plot point. This is going to be relevant for Huan, right? And Huan's being talked around into this whole situation, right? So we have to be able to be ready to believe it when Luthien starts talking about that. Goodness, we have to give Luthien the opportunity even to observe it. Like, how would she even know?
We're
Right.
gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Episode 4 needs to include that scene.
Yeah, it really does. But I mean, I know in the text they have some time. You know, they hang out for a while, so she has plenty of opportunity to learn some of these things about him.
So this is all I'm going to say about this. Luthien, the anthropologist.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's not a phrase I was expecting, but I'm all right with that. Okay. Interesting. Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, I knew you guys would have thought about this, but that was one of the things. It's one of the things that I was sort of looking for, like wondering if we were going to get, and when we got introduced to Baron, were we going to get any hints, direct or indirect, about his animal friendship thing? But it's fine. Okay, cool. Finrod, I loved this. This worked really, really well. Actually including the commissioning of the Nauglamir into what the C plot, I guess, of this episode. I thought that was very, very well done. My favorite thing about it? My favorite thing about it is what you guys did for Finrod's character in doing that, right? It would be easy to make Finrod look like a fop, right? Mr. I brought more jewels than anybody else, and like, oh, could you please make me the greatest bling that anybody has, like on this? Like, there's lots of ways in which that could make Finrod look not great, and very few in which he comes out looking well as a result, right? I mean, like, honestly, I don't think that anybody, no matter how much people are willing to invest in, like, Noldor and their bling, it's just like, it's a Noldor thing, right? You just have to understand that it means something different to them than it means to us. There might be some people who would be willing to kind of go there, but still, it's not a good look. It's not, especially now, right? The Dagor Bragollach has just happened. My 2 brothers have just died. I'm going to celebrate by having a really nice necklace made, right? Like, it's weird. Like, that would be weird at best, right? But I loved it. I loved the way that it came across, not as, like, this is clearly not, it was like the last thing on his mind, right? The way that he comes up with this, sort of provoked by circumstances, but he's, showing not only his courtesy to the dwarves, but his how far out of his way he's willing to go in order to make them comfortable and to maintain the alliance and make sure there's no, and the dwarves are clearly being, I really liked how, the dwarves were being difficult without being absolute jerks, right? It was clear that like dealing with the dwarves was really challenging, and Finrod was doing the best he could. Again, Xerac didn't come across as horrible, right? It wasn't that he was a terrible person and was being a jerk to Finrod, but again, like, it's also clear that making them happy was not easy. And I thought that line was really well, was well trodden.
Yeah, the easy thing to do there would have been, look, do you guys want to come in or not? Like,
right. Exactly. You know, I'm trying to, like, can't you see what I'm trying to do here? Will you work with me, please? Right. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I was making it too difficult to get through the polite diplomatic language, because that conversation went longer than I thought it was going to when I started writing it, and then it just kept going.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I liked that under those circumstances, though, because especially since, I mean, we saw a significant amount of tension between the dwarves and Caranthir before, right? And so, I mean, we've had 3 to 4 elf dwarf interactions, right? We've seen the dwarves with Caranthir, right? And that's rocky, right? We've seen what our friend Norn, was it Norn? Yeah, Norn with the Sindar, right? And that went really well. We have Eol, and that's its own thing, right? And we had the petty dwarves, which was, you know, a little bit uncertain. And Finrod was tangentially involved, but not directly involved. Well, semi-directly. Anyway, but he was, that wasn't exactly a Finrod story as much as it was some other things. So, but in any case, like, if that hadn't gone long, Marie, like if it had just been like, you know, swift and cheerful on both sides, it would have been strange. Like, I like the fact that it's clear, on the one hand, it's clear that they are allies. They do trade with each other. They are willing to work together. This is a constructive relationship that they have, and that Finrod is deliberately maintaining this constructive relationship. All those things I thought were really good and really important to convey. And yet again, like, but it's work, man. Like, it doesn't happen automatically. Like, this is something you've got to really work at, and I think that that's really important. Yeah, I agree. Evan says that he loves the polite tension that happens in that scene. Dwarves and elves working together and staying in good relations is non-trivial, right? And I thought that it was important that should be conveyed. And what's more, again, given what we know the future to be of the Nauglamir, right? You know, it was important to have that framework of tension from the beginning, and to establish that, like, how did this collaboration, right, between Noldor gems from Valinor and dwarf craftsmanship, how did that even become a thing, right? So it all came together so beautifully, both to sort of like as even a justification for the existence of the Nauglamir, because it's not, even in the book, it's not trivial. That is, we don't get much of a story. It just gets a reference, right? Like a sentence we get about the forging of the Nauglamir, but even there, it's one of those points in the Silmarillion where I'm conscious of the suspension of disbelief. Why did dwarves make this? Why did Finrod have them make it exactly? Why didn't he do it himself? Why did the Noldor not do this themselves? Like, why are they subletting this out, you know, to dwarves like that? I mean, okay, like I accept it, right? I'm willing to accept it, but the reasons for that are not. He doesn't give reasons for it, right? And so therefore, I'm just like making stuff up in my head, right? Trying to figure out why that would be. Not only, you know, does this plot line give reasons, I found those reasons totally compelling. And Finrod came out of this looking awesome. I mean, just awesome. His relationship with his own gems, right? Even the way that you guys were connecting that to his girlfriend, right? Loved that. You know, just the way in which, not to mention, like, I was obviously very much aware of the ways in which you were using the scene with his gems as a way to set up the song battle with Sauron and the scenes from the song battle with Sauron. Like I could feel it coming, right? His memories of Valinor and how he's going to be drawing on those same memories of Valinor and the same images he's describing to Xerox here in his song battle with Sauron later. I'm like, this is just genius. That's just absolutely brilliant. The way that all came together. So good. This was just, and I'm pretty sure I'm remembering correctly, this one was new, right? This did not come out of our previous discussion. This was the most unexpected to me of all the major sort of plot lines. This is the most unexpected to me, and the one that I liked best, the one that I thought worked really, really bad. This was so good. So doing so many things, accomplishing so many things at once. Really, really elegant.
And I mean, this is how we worked the Silmarils into the first episode of the season.
Absolutely.
And this is when Xerox finds out about Silmarils. Like, so this is going to pay off for a while.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, the Xerox reaction to the Silmarils was really cool. Yeah. Loved that. Yeah. No, it was that we were able to go there, even to remind the viewers, because it's been a while since the Silmarils have been an issue. Like an explicit issue. I mean, how long has it been? Did it happen in season 5? Does anybody in season 5 really? I mean, I'm not saying that they're never mentioned, and we see them sometime. We see Morgoth, and so we see the Silmarils, but it's never really like a focal point of attention, really. In season 5, not even much in season 4. Like in season 3, when Feanor's still alive and we're pursuing, right? Like we're more or less conscious of the Silmarils. But once we've settled down in Middle-earth in season 4, I feel like the Silmarils really begin to fade into the background. And
the kinslaying was the more important aspect.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And once Feanor is dead, the bad justification of the kinslaying begins to pale, right? And the mere fact of the kinslaying becomes the big deal. Right. Which is perfectly appropriate, I think. Right. There's nobody really in the post Feanor world who is saying, yeah, the kinslaying, that was unfortunate, but you got to do what you got to do to get the Silmarils back. Like nobody's talking like that in the post Feanor Middle Earth. So anyway, this was all so even just as a mechanism to remind the readers of the existence of the Silmarils and their significance, like how people look at them and why people covet them and why this is a really big deal. Obviously that's going to be, we're not only setting up episode 4, right, and the quest that Thingol is going to set them on, but as you say, so many other things moving forward. The Nargothrond storyline with Celgorm and Curufin, ultimately the Nauglamir's future, and I am sure people will be remembering this scene very clearly when the Silmaril gets to be worked into the Nauglamir, right? I mean, that's so good. So anyway, this was just awesome. I just loved this. This was the only question that I had, and it wasn't a huge question. What's going on to the east of Nargothrond? Why couldn't they get home? The dragon?
Dragon.
The dragon. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Which we still have not yet gotten around to showing. We're working on it.
Right. Right.
Also, the scene where Mithras retakes the pass and is reestablishing the line there in the north, that happens after these dwarves couldn't get home.
Right.
So
okay,
when the pass was not retaken yet, there could be orc raiding parties going down into East Beleriand. So it was, the whole place was chaotic.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Because they wouldn't necessarily, would the dwarves of Nogrod they wouldn't have to actually pass by
They don't have to.
Glaurung, I mean, yeah.
Right. But they, well, the Dwarves of Belagast had been going that way because Caranthir more or less demanded it if they wanted to trade with the Noldor.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, no, that makes sense. It was the one thing I was like, why in that? But it was the timing, right? Because I was already thinking about Maedhros reestablishing things over there.
Yes.
So I was in my head, I was just thinking of the dragon as the big problem, and I'm like, I think they would have gotten further before they ran into dragon rumors or something like that, and could have gotten around it, right, by just going to a different part of the mountains than the part way up in the north by Hellhorn. But anyway, yeah. So, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Minor character appearances. Okay, so we've got Thingol. All right, so showing Thingol and Melian operating in Doriath, I thought was really interesting. I really liked the choice of like pretext for that scene, right? Of the like refugee Sindar returning, the whole attitude of Thingol in welcoming them back, right? Welcome back to like the safe home of the Sindar, with like just a hint of rebuke for having left in the first place. Right. I mean, it wasn't strong, but I detected a hint of, you really oughtn't to have left. Can we all agree now that you should have really stayed in the first place? Like it wasn't strong. Like he didn't come off as a jerk. Like, hi, refugees, it's your own fault, isn't it? Like it wasn't as bad as that. But I was detecting a hint, right? Just a hint of like, I'm glad that you've come home to where the Sindar belong, right? Which is here in Doriath. So, which seemed to me quite fitting. He seemed similarly. Thingol seemed. He came across to me as, again, not hugely, not inappropriately, but like faintly, slightly smug. Like he's. He's
not so like, dramatically magnanimous about it, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what gave that impression, right? That, like, welcome back to Doriath, where everything's fine and no one has to worry about anything, unlike everywhere around us, which is in smoldering ruins right now, right? How's that working out for those Noldor neighbors of ours, right? Well, come back to Thingol, Thingol's place. Well, Melian's place, really. But anyway, we're all fine here. Like, look how much better we're doing than all of our immediate neighbors, those kinslaying Noldor who are getting their comeuppance right now, right? I mean, like, he doesn't say any of that. Now, I'm radically exaggerating because I thought the element of that in his attitude and in his speeches was way within tolerance levels. Like, I think it would be, thinking those things. If Thingol... We almost can't have Thingol showing any hint of like real compassion. Like, oh, like everyone else is suffering, I feel horrible. Well, then why aren't you going out and helping, you git, right? Like, would be the obvious response. So like he has to feel like that's the only way he could be characterized, or he'd be doing something, right? But given that he is just maintaining the boundaries of Doriath, not even letting the Noldor in, right? Noldor and refugees not welcome in Doriath, right? Turning people away at the boundaries, as was obvious from the messengers of Maedhros, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like he it's not possible to show him being more sort of friendly and concerned and compassionate than he was, but like solicitous for the Sindar and yeah, kind of smug. Anyway, so the choice of that scene of their welcoming in the refugees, I thought worked really, really well. And the contrast with Luthien, right? Luthien's humility, rather than being the like, hi, I am the magnanimous host, that her father was doing. Luthien being like, I'm going to comfort your children, right? And, help them to feel better in this awkward situation. And, that was, I thought, really wonderful and a great way the segue to the flowers springing up by her feet was really cool. Like I thought that the implication, right, in the contextual implication that it was almost like a thing she was doing to please the children, right? Again, not that it necessarily, but again, this in context, it felt it like partook of the spirit with which she was playing with the children, right? And I thought that kind of associating the flowers springing up around her with, both innocence and kindness in the way in which it was in that context seemed to me very, very appropriate. And
these
really
children are entering fairy.
Yeah.
It's like even for elves, they are entering fairy. And there's been some talk about that there are folks who feel that we've been avoiding the fairy tale elements of the story in a lot of ways. And to some extent, that is not entirely untrue. There are things that we have to show on screen, and people have to see them with their eyeballs, right?
Right.
And there are things that human eyes don't like. They're like, that's not how things happen, right?
There are a lot of things in fairy tales that are really hard to depict.
Yes.
I mean, there's a reason that Disney changes a whole bunch. There's several reasons, but some of the things,
especially
that are
when they go
changed in
live
fairy
action.
tales. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm here to assure people, this is still a fairy story.
It's still a fairy story, and this one especially, right? This is one
Yeah.
of the core fairy story things. Yeah.
The Lord of the Forest, the elf queen. Well, she's not an elf queen, but Melian is the queen of her realm. She is the one whose border you trespass when you enter Doriath.
Yes,
and
the
then,
dancing
course,
elf lady in the woods and the human interloper. Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. You've got like all of the core fairy tale, fairy story tropes that here. Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, this is not the place to be backing down from that kind of element for sure. Yeah, good. And Dairon's comparatively contented bachelor state, I thought, came across well. I like the tactful inquiry from the unnamed Sindar of probing after their relationship status, right? I thought that very effectively conveyed the expectations, right? That there's assumptions have been made, right, about that the two of them would, but without our bold choice deliberately to diffuse a love triangle, I thought worked very well, rather than inserting awkward love triangles where they really don't need to be. To go out of our way to eliminate a love triangle that actually is there in the text. I thought that the first steps of that bold venture went across pretty well. And can I just say, like, how double gutsy this move would be in a real show, right? Not only to go out of our way to remove a love triangle, but to replace a relationship premised in the original on some kind of like sexual tension, like it's explicitly a romantic relationship, at least on one side, right? And to replace that with a friendship instead, like that almost never happens. The converse happens all the time, right? Let's take people who are friends and instead let's make them, at least one of them romantically interested in the other, because then people will believe in their relationship, right? Believe that they're close and that they care about each other. And apparently it's one of my pet peeves about Hollywood is that they don't care about friendship or take it at all seriously. Men and women can never be friends, and anyway, all kinds of things, right? Issues with that. So I love the way in which the story is flying against that with Dairon.
it's not going to, completely avoid this, because despite his assurances right now that he is content, doesn't mean he will remain content.
Well, it's one thing to say I'm fine if we don't get married. It's another thing to say I welcome her marrying that guy. Right? Absolutely. Especially when that guy is that guy, right? I mean, so yeah, that's yes. Yeah, no, totally understandable. Totally understandable. And that's but again, establishing that as the tone of their relationship, and I thought that worked really, really well. I loved Celegorm and Curufin. The main question I was left with after the Celegorm and Curufin scene was, how are Celegorm and Curufin ever going to recover their relationship with Maedhros after this season? Right? I mean,
short answer is they're not.
They're not. Yeah. I mean, I mean, holy cow. It's so introducing them as not only failures, but irresponsible failures, possibly. Like, it's not just that they tried and failed, but the kind of failures who didn't really try and perhaps couldn't be bothered or whatever, right? I mean, like, it's a bad look from the very beginning. So we are so ready for Celegorm and Curufin to be the villains, which I think is a great move on the whole. I mean, we don't have time to show, to start with like quasi-heroic Celegorm and Curufin and show them falling into disgrace. There's just not screen time for that in this season for them. So yeah, now establishing them as totally, I was going to say in the doghouse, but given that we're talking about Huan, that's not really much of an insult now, is it? Anyway, but showing that they are very much in the low esteem of their brother from the start, questioning not only their actions but their motives, without totally being himself a jerk and calling them out. Yes. Giving them this one job in order, like, explicitly in order to redeem, okay, not explicitly, implicitly in order to redeem themselves.
Yes.
Right. Which they are not only going to fail to do, but are going to undo in a sense. Right.
Right.
So no, that was, Celegorm and Curufin are well positioned for where we want them to be. Of course, we couldn't get anything like, differentiation of their two characters. And we've gotten some of that in the past, but, I guess that was the one moment when Maedhros kind of appeals to Curufin, showing that he thinks that Curufin is the brains of the operation, right? There's that one reference. Am I recalling that right, Marie? That he, it's clear, Maedhros' question makes it clear that he assumes that Curufin is the brains of the operation.
Yeah, there's two parts of the scene that are differentiated, and one is when Maedhros starts saying that they did something wrong, Celegorm is immediately verbally defensive, like, right. Oh, we weren't trying to do this. So right. Curufin stays silent for that. Right. He's not going to engage. He knows what Maedhros is saying. He's not letting himself be drawn in. So Maedhros does have to specifically ask him, hey, Curufin, any ideas on how to retake a keep from a dragon?
Right.
Even though Celegorm's the one who fought the dragon before.
Right.
Celegorm has encountered Glorong and interacted with him. Curufin's never seen the dragon. And right. Maedhros still asked for his advice there. So, that was to differentiate which one is the strategic thinker here that Maedhros might actually want advice from.
While also showing Curufin as being both kind of slippery, or sort of slippery and slimy, right? Like, because doesn't he kind of say essentially, I have plausible deniability on the dragon front? Like, I can't. How am I supposed to have come up with a plan to, when I've never seen the dragon and whatever? Anyway, yeah. So there's, I like so. I'm ready for Celegorm and Curufin. My only question there was, what do we see of Huan in this scene? Anything?
He's there.
He's just establishing his presence, right?
Yeah, I didn't do anything with him. Did you want to see something from him here at the beginning?
I'm just thinking, again, we have so little time with them on screen, right? I mean, total number of minutes for Celegorm and Curufin, it's going to be relatively low, at least until the Baron's Leap episode where they'll get more time. And of course, they'll have a few big scenes, obviously, in the usurpation of Nargothrond scene. But I'm just trying to think, what do we need to establish with Huan and Celegorm's relationship at the start?
It's tricky because you do want to avoid too much anthropomorphizing him.
It's true
at this point, but just showing that he's still loyal to Celegorm. You know, he he deliberately goes out of his way to save Celegorm's life in the previous episode, or the episode immediately previous to the previous episode,
right.
The penultimate episode of season 5. But he can't really he's not going to talk in the scene, so at best he can give Celegorm kind of like,
right. Now I'm thinking, like, at the most it would be some kind of look or other, right? But I'm mostly thinking about like body language. Like, is Huan happy right now? Is he uncomfortable already? Where is Huan in his attitude towards Celegorm? Like, is he beginning to like rethink his life choices yet?
He's a little embarrassed for him, maybe.
Right, something like that. I mean, he's got to be aware of the fact that Celegorm is doing the opposite of covering himself with glory recently, right?
He's got a little egg on his face.
But he hasn't done anything bad, really.
In a while.
Right.
Yeah,
in a while.
I mean, that's the coastline, yeah.
That's
but
right.
I mean, no, so the whole is Huan rethinking his life choices? No. Huan is still quite loyal to Celegorm. And yeah, Celegorm didn't pull this battle off very well. He's not exactly doing a great job here. But Huan was a part of that battle too, so it reflects just as badly on himself. Like, he's not blaming Celegorm for the loss the way Maedhros is.
If there's one Huan thing I would want to see, then it wouldn't be much, and people could miss it, right? It would be the scene where Celegorm gets defensive, right? Caranthir is smart enough to process this and say nothing in order to not make himself sound bad, right? Celegorm gets defensive and therefore kind of exposes himself in that scene, right? Huan should just look kind of ashamed of himself. Like, he should be the only one of the three, right? The kind of droopy tail dog look, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, he should be the only one of the three of them who looks ashamed of what it like regretful of how things have turned out and what happened, right? Celegorm is trying to defend himself. Curufin is trying to maneuver around the situation, right? Huan would be the only one showing honest shame of how things worked out, right?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely insert that.
Yeah. That's, yes. Just a sight of droopy tail Huan, I think, is all I would need. All I need. But that's enough to, like, the thing that it would show, the seed that it would plant, right, would be that Huan's heart is in a very different place from Celegorm's, right? It's the risk that I'm wanting to control is that it's very easy to assume that the bad guy's dog is a bad guy, right? That if Celegorm has bad motivations, then his dog is somehow infected by these motivations. That his dog is complicit in Celegorm's bad choices and ill will, right? And to show that although Huan is loyal to Celegorm, he is not, he does not share his, view on life, right? Would be, I think, an important seed to plant, because then it shows that when he leaves Celegorm, this is not an act of betrayal. It's not even like a conversion moment for Huan, right? Where he like I'm gonna stop running with the bad guys and you know, I'm gonna, like, you know, leave the street gang and join the good guy. That's not what's happening with Huan at that moment.
He's not General Hux.
He's not General Hux. No, he's always been a good guy, right? He's always been a good guy, but he was essentially subordinating his desire to do good to his loyalty to Caligorn, right? I'm gonna, even though, you know, yeah. Anyway, just to show that gap, so that when he goes with Luthien, we don't want Huan to look like a traitor, right? Or even to make it look like Luthien's not saving him, right? Luthien's not converting him, like I said. Anyway, so that's the Huan touch that I think would be cool to introduce. Last thing before we go, on the Tolsirion stuff and the ghost fight. We talked about the ghost stuff a lot, and I would feel much better about the ghost fight after, with those changes, right? With this, once we've sucked out the eyeballs, I'll feel better about it. The ghosts are, so the ghosts are possessing people?
At least in one case, yes.
At least in one case. Okay.
So the guy who's killing the other elves, but thinks he's fighting the ghosts, is clearly his perception has been altered. So he's basically possessed by the ghost.
Okay.
Yes. There's a story involving the Justice League, where Wonder Woman and Superman each find themselves fighting like this demonic creature, right? And as they're fighting and like these creatures are just shockingly powerful,
right? And
then Wonder Woman catches a glimpse of herself fighting this creature in the mirror and sees that it's Superman, right? You know, so it's not entirely unlike that scenario.
Right. Is it an illusion, or is it actual because the mechanics of the possession, this was one of the only questions that I had. That was one of the things that I was kind of wondering about. I could imagine us going so far as to say that the spirits that are dominated by Sauron have themselves the power to dominate others. But that seems an additional step that we would need to somehow prepare for, I think.
It's mostly the altered perception thing. So we see through the guy's eyes where he sees that he's fighting ghosts and he's calling for help and all that. And then you see from the other people's eyes, like, why are all these dead bodies around here? So it's okay, you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't. So what altered his perception, I didn't really clarify.
Yeah, we didn't have to explain it, but like the kind of the warping of apparent reality, the way in which it was almost like some kind of like dream sequence or something like that or some kind of illusion, some kind of, you know, veil over his sight or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really interesting. There were several ways in which, so the several different mechanisms essentially that you generated to show how the ghosts succeed in doing what they did. It's not just and we're going to make them very scared until they all run away in terror thing. There was like a little bit more to it than that. And even as, I forget who it was commenting much earlier on in the evening about, it was Philip, I think, about elves not being afraid of spirits, right? We did, in fact, start with that. Like, they didn't, when they first saw the spirits, their reaction was not, ghosts, right? They were like, what is this? Like, let us try to understand this, right? And figure out what's going on. Like, they didn't merely panic like humans might or whatever. Yeah, by the way, loved. So I saw that you, in one sense, kind of toned down my Anile Dracula reference, but I really kind of liked the Anile, the bat at the window Dracula reference. That was very Lucy Westenra. I appreciated that. So that was fun. One thing I was a little bit unclear about, though, the chest. I was a little unclear about the chest in the well. On the one hand, the well with the chest, which seemed to be a preparation for the tub of evil, right? But I didn't quite get what was in the chest, or like how what that was.
Okay, so we had to get the ghosts inside the tower somehow, and we wanted most of the scene to focus on what the ghosts do once they're already in the tower.
Right.
So we went back and forth several times on how to get them inside, and we went with or at least I guess I went with the option of most scene economy of like, how can we get them there fastest, which is everything happens off screen and you just get the final step of Anile releasing the ghosts into the tower. So how did all the ghosts get shoved into a chest and then dumped in the river and then fished out of the well? Well, I don't know. Sauron's plot apparently involves some convoluted way to get the chest inside the tower so that Anile can release the ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There wasn't time to do a scene, like an extra scene where he leaves Tol Sirion, for example, and comes back with a chest and nobody has any suspicions about this in any way, or like it was
the idea of little bat Thuringwethel carrying the chest into the tower seemed to be a little ridiculous looking.
Or big bat Thuringwethel, yes.
Either, but anyway, the bat carrying the chest probably wasn't where we wanted to go with that. Yeah. And we wanted it to be clear that without Anile being complicit in it, the ghosts don't get in.
Yeah,
so there had to be
agreed.
some
that clearly had to be something. So I'm thinking we could simplify this somewhat. So first of all, on the one hand, the mere question, how do the ghosts get in, doesn't seem like it need be hard, right? Unless we're operating under a ghosts can't cross running water framework, which would be totally justifiable, by the way, but which of course is not established, and only the keenly folklore aware would. I mean, I'm just like imagining the the tweets when the show drops, like, ghosts wouldn't cross running water like that. Everybody knows that. But still, seriously, like, apart from that issue, like, they're like immaterial. Like, can come in?
So
can't they come in?
There's two issues. One is the running water issue, which, as you say, we could just ignore if we wanted to. Tolkien kind of couldn't get it to work with the ring race the way he wanted to anyway.
Yeah, he kind of gave up on it. Yeah, exactly.
The second issue, though, is that with a lot of vampire lore, you have to invite
the invitation,
or else they can't get in. Right. And with this
otherwise,
tower,
why do we need Anile for it?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. No.
So the tower being built by elves and established by Finrod, Sauron can't just send his ghost army into that tower because the tower says no.
Right. Yeah.
On whatever spiritual level you want to say.
I like that. Like, when Anile he did the invitation, like, he invited them in, right? That still happened, right? But I don't think you need the chest necessarily for.
So he can just stand at the window and do that?
Yeah, stand at the window or stand at the gate, right? I mean, he could even go to the gate, perhaps.
The gate's got to be opened for that to work. So he could open the gate, but then, like, now he's opening up the gate, right? Like, there's a whole thing there.
Right. Yeah. Then it makes it look more mundane, but it doesn't have to be at the gate then. I say, so I would be in favor of ignoring the running water.
Okay. So he can just call down into the well that all these ghosts start coming out of the well.
I like that.
No, or even, what if it's okay.
Especially if he opens up, if, like, there's a wooden cover to it and he opens up the wooden cover and calls down into the well.
What if it's not about the well at first? Because then still there's the question of, why are they in the well? The ghosts. Yeah. How'd they get in the well?
Yeah.
What if it's what if it's the other way around? What if he goes up instead of down? I know, like, having it involved with the well is like setting up the tub of evil later on, and I get that. But what if instead the tub of evil is a reversal, right? What if he goes up to the top of the tower? Like, we show Anail standing at the top of the tower, right? So you can see, like, all of the Isle of Tol Sirion, and he's issuing the invitation. They can, like, the ghosts can fly, right? Like, they don't need a land access. They don't actually need a physical gate opened in order to get in, right? So if we show him standing, like, at the top of the tower, right? That way we could even show, like, the guards or whoever, like, we could see Anail walking by, right? Like, him walking by in this sort of trance up to the top, and then he issues his invitation and he welcomes them all in, and then we see them come, right? Then we cut to the guards right downstairs, and we could even show, like, during the scene, we could even get, like, Anail, like, walking down. Like, I know we still need him for later on, right? So but he could just be, like, walking down through the chaos and everything, and nobody really notices him until he's discovered, at the end by Merrill, as happens at the end of the scene. Anyway, like, that would simplify things, right? If just the invitation is all that's needed, then we don't have to worry about the mechanics of, like, how the ghosts get anywhere. They're there. They just need to be invited in. Like, that's the sort of the final step, and he could do that invitation. So I think, and then it might also, because one of the other effects, the other thing, Nick, that made me think about the top of the tower, the overall flow of action is kind of top down. The guards are kind of up in the tower to begin with, right, on patrol, or were they outside on the ground on patrol? I didn't get that. Oh, hang on. Yeah.
They were sitting in the hall, like, just hanging out. The first two guards we see. Then they go out to the wall to see what's going on when they hear something.
Okay.
So but I can rearrange it so that there's a motion that makes sense.
A motion.
We start at the top, and
we start at the top, and then at the end, the action ends at the gates, right? With the when the wolves come in and Sauron enters, right? So that, I mean, it's what I kind of like about that is that the tower is taken in reverse order. Right, like the gates fall last, and that's a little bit boss, actually. Right, that the very last thing that happens is that the gates are forced. Right, anyway, just the way in which it's all inverted is it would be kind of fun, I think. But anyway, that was all, I think, the primary things that I had about. So I had questions about the mechanics of that, but again, I think if we simplify the mechanics, I think that'll work. Good. And Gil-galad being the ambassador to Doriath, right? Don't be too much like Grandpa. I thought that was kind of, or learn from Grandpa's struggles with this challenge. I like that. Okay. We are running late, but we got through, I think, all that we wanted to discuss. Well, here's the summary, but that's okay. We're good. Our next session will be in a few weeks' time. So next week is Mythmoot. I'm not going to be available the week after, so it's going to be 3 weeks from tonight that we're going to do our next session on the 7th of July at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So there's going to be a little bit of a break, and we're going to be thinking more about magic. We talked some about necromancy here, but we need to continue this discussion, thinking about how we represent magic. We've been kind of in some ways almost avoiding that question all the way through the film project to some extent. We just this is a season in which we really need to work out exactly how do we want to depict and represent and deal with magic in Tolkien's world. It's kind of a big question in general. So we're going to talk about that next time on July 7th. The next script discussion, which will be a discussion of The Frame, episodes 1 through 5, will be on Friday, July 15th. So it'll be the week after that at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to continue moving forward towards episode 2 and everything as we go. Strong beginning to the season, I think, here with episode 1. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Maria and Nick, for joining me tonight. And Maria, awesome work on this script. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.